Howdy, Facebook Live. Sean Yesner here with Yesner Law and with the Crushing Debt podcast. And I need to record a couple of episodes. And so I thought while I did, I would fire up the camera and fire up Facebook Live and let you guys watch me record an episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. It looks like this will be probably next year's podcast or next week's podcast. Sorry. I probably need to record maybe one more. I see that my lovely, beautiful, supportive wife is watching. So, honey, I'm just going to record one or two podcast episodes, and then I will be home, I promise. But like always, after I'm done recording the content, if you guys have questions, drop them here in the comments. And as soon as the episode is over, as bonus content for all of you watching on Facebook Live, I will answer your questions before I stop the live stream. But I do need to get the podcast itself rolling. The episode that I'm going to record now is all about budgeting and all about the system that I use for budgeting. Now that we're into the new year, how do you budget? And so that's what I'm going to talk about in this week's episode of the podcast. So let me get all of that stuff fired up and off we go. On this week's podcast, Budgeting for Success. So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. My name is Sean Yesner with Yesner Law, and I do want to remind you all again that the podcast is also supported by a book of similar title that I wrote called Crushing Debt, and that book is available on Amazon.com. But what I talked about in the brief introduction was how do we budget? So as I record this episode, we're into the new year, but I think budgeting is something that applies the entire year. So what I thought I'd do is go very quickly over a method that I use to budget. And then after that, a method that I use to maintain my own accountability. I thought that would be something useful to talk about. Now, interestingly, the budget that I use is the budget that we have to file in a bankruptcy case because I think it covers everything. So all these people that come at you with budgets and systems and whatnot, it's something that we're already covering within the bankruptcy code. So why reinvent the wheel? Let's just talk about a budget. And so, I think the first thing that you really need to do is be clear on what your income is. So you need to look at what is your gross monthly income. Now, for those of you that are paid every other week on a biweekly basis, twice every 2 weeks, there are 2 months out of the year that you get paid 3 times. And so I think you need to take that into account as well. Or even better from a budgetary perspective, if you can find a way to live comfortably on the 2 paychecks a month, then those 2 months that you get that third paycheck, that's just extra money. That's just found money for you. And then when you add your tax refund on top of that, and so there's all these ways that you can create room in your budget to save money just based on your income. If you can figure out how to budget so that the 2 payroll checks I get every month are going to allow me to survive, then you can take those 2 months that you get 3 paychecks, you can put those directly into savings, save yourself a bunch of money, and that'll be your cushion at the end of the year. That'll be your emergency fund. That'll be how you save for vacation. And just with the first line of your budget, the income line of your budget, you can save some money. Now, if you're self-employed like I am, you just have to be a little bit more disciplined that every month that you get paid, you put some money away in savings. And so I do that. The law firm pays me a salary, and then I have the law firm direct deposit my salary into my bank account, but it also sends a couple of $100 a month or every paycheck into savings. And so that way I'm able to build up a little bit of savings. But that's the top line. That's the income line of the budget. The next thing that I think you should do is take a look at the expenses that are allowed in the budget. So what are we talking about with expenses? Well, the very first expense that we have to worry about is keeping a roof over your head. So what's your rent payment? What's your mortgage payment? And then you can break your mortgage payment up into taxes and insurance, principal and interest, PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And one reason that you should understand those numbers, one reason that you should break your expenses into principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, a couple of reasons. First, if you have some of adjustable rate product, then principal and interest are going to change. But second, and more importantly, if your taxes and insurance may change from year to year, they may go up, they may go down. Now, where I live in West Chase, we have a CDD, a Community Development District. And this year, one of our bonds that pays for the CDD, and for those that don't understand, the way that I explain the CDD is it's the governmental agency that plans out where are the roads going to be, where are the stoplights going to be, where are the medians going to be, where are the speed bumps going to be, all that different kind of stuff. They're in charge of the cleanup of the trees and flowers and whatnot. It's a lot more involved than that, but basically that's what the CDD does. Well, the CDD is paid by bonds, so the county issues bonds or the city issues bonds, and then that bond money goes to pay the CDD, and then our tax money goes to pay off the bonds. Well, one of my particular CDD bonds got paid off, which dropped my property taxes by $500. Well, when my property taxes go down, the bank doesn't have to escrow as much money. So not only do I get that $500 back that they overestimated on the amount of the escrow, but I also get the decrease in the escrow payments, the decrease in my mortgage payments. Now, one of the things that I think I plan on doing is continuing to pay my mortgage at the same level, and that way I'm paying down principal faster. But one thing I could choose to do is drop my mortgage payments to the amount that the bank requires. And then when I get my escrow refund from the bank, again, that's another bump of money that I can put in savings for vacation or for emergency or for any other purpose. So I think making sure you know what your taxes and insurance are and your mortgage payment, I think that's a great way to see what can I budget for this year, for next year, when I know what my taxes are going to do, when I know what my insurance is going to do. Or can I shop around and find a property and casualty insurance agent that can get me a cheaper insurance product? I don't think you can really reduce your property taxes, but can I find another agent that can get me the same coverage or better coverage with a cheaper insurance product? That's another way to save money in your budget. The next thing we need to look at is home maintenance, repair, and upkeep expenses. And I think you do need to budget something for that. I mean, I just paid, I think it was like 20 or 30 bucks because my kitchen cabinet hinges were broken. And so the kitchen cabinet doors wouldn't stay shut. And so I had to go buy the particular hinges to go and fix. That's one of the things on my honey-do list. But I need to budget for that type of money. I need to budget to buy new air filters. I need to budget to buy batteries for the smoke detectors. You know, what other things are included in that home maintenance, repair, and upkeep expenses that you can budget for at the beginning of the year? You also need to budget for homeowner association or condominium association assessments. And so luckily I'm in a place where I pay annually, but still it's something that every November, December, I need to pay because mine are due in January. So are there any homeowner associations assessments or condominium assessments that you need to pay? What about additional mortgage payments? Do you have a second mortgage? Do you have a home equity line of credit or a HELOC? Is there another mortgage that you need to budget for to pay? Or do you have a water softener system? Do we need to pay for that? Or do you have any other type of monthly recurring expense related to the house? Make sure you write that down. Make sure that you track that. Utilities. So we're talking about electricity, heat, gas, water, sewer, garbage collection, telephone, internet, satellite, cable, all those different utility expenses we need to budget for. Now, again, especially here in Florida, in the summer months, my air conditioning unit is going to work on overdrive. And so I need to make sure that I budget properly for an increase in utility expenses in the summer months when the air conditioner is on. In the winter months, maybe winter days that we experience here in Florida, I can also budget for that decrease in utility costs, but then a corresponding increase in gas costs because I need to power the heater in the house, which is a gas heater, versus the air conditioner, which runs on electricity. So you need to make sure that you're budgeting properly. Now, one way to do this is maybe you budget in your electricity expenses the highest month for the entire year. And so that way, when your expenses come in less than that, again, you have a way to put some money aside in savings. You have a way to save up some money, go on vacation, fund emergencies, fund retirement, all that different kind of stuff. You know, cell phone plans. Is there a way that you can switch cell phones and decrease your cell phone plan? That's negotiable. Telephone plans, internet plans, cable plans. I mean, a lot of people now are getting into the cut the cord movement, where they're cutting their cable bills by going to Hulu and all those other streaming services, Netflix and all that other kind of stuff. Is there a way that you can cut your utility expenses? Food and housekeeping supplies. I mean, how much do you spend on food? What we spend on food here every month, and we have two different types of bills. We've got our bills from the grocery store, whether it's the general grocery store or whether it's one of these specialty stores that sells organic foods or whatnot. And then we've got our bulk food bills. And so I go to Costco every couple of weeks to restock on some of the stuff, that non-perishable stuff or stuff that we use regularly from Costco. And then my wife goes to Publix, goes to the grocery store every week to restock the perishable stuff, or the stuff that we go through really, really quickly. But can you take advantage of discounts? Can you take advantage of 2-for-1s? Can you take advantage of coupons? What things can you do to reduce those monthly expenses that you incur for food and housekeeping supplies? What about child and education costs? So one way to reduce child and education costs is talk to your daycare. I mean, a lot of daycares will offer scholarships. They'll offer price breaks. They'll offer different things to make the child care more affordable, because they know that if they don't, you're going to take your children and you're going to go to another child care facility. I mean, these are for-profit entities, and so you are able to negotiate with them. Or you can actually take your kids to a more cheap, more affordable, I don't mean cheap in terms of the quality of the care that they provide, but cheap in terms of the price. You can take your kids to a more affordable child care. And so there's an opportunity to cut costs. Clothing, laundry, dry cleaning expenses. Maybe you wear stuff that needs to be dry cleaned a little bit more before you take it to the dry cleaners. Maybe you don't buy clothes that need to be dry cleaned, and so you can sort of cut those expenses, clothing and laundry expenses. What about personal care products and services? Now, I tend to be lucky. Those of you that know what I look like know that I don't really need to invest in shampoo, and I can't really tell you the last time I ever bought conditioner. But can you cut some expenses? I know from my wife that shampoo and conditioner tend to be very expensive depending on the type of conditioner that you get. And so is there a way there that you can cut that expense? Medical and dental expenses. Can you negotiate? So I had a client who just had a child go through surgery, and the deductible was negotiated. Not the deductible itself, but payments on the deductible. And so in this particular case, the hospital agreed to accept the deductible on a zero interest plan over the course of about 12 months. And so rather than chunking the entire deductible down, the client was able to pay in monthly installments at 0% interest. So if you've got medical issues or dental issues, things of that nature, those can be negotiated. Transportation. You know, a lot of times if you're in a car that is too expensive, you can negotiate to get a cheaper car. You can turn in your car. You can get a cheaper car. You can reduce your car payments. But not only that, if you change your car, maybe you get a more gas efficient car. Maybe you get a more affordable car, and you can cut gas costs. Maybe the route that you take to work, if you go through a toll, maybe you can change the route to avoid that toll. And there's all kinds of ways to cut costs when you're dealing with car expenses, transportation expenses, entertainment, clubs, recreation, newspapers, magazines. You know, I canceled subscriptions to a lot of magazines to save myself some money on an annual basis, and really didn't miss them. I could find that same information from the magazine on the internet, and so I was able to save a ton of money by cutting out some magazine expenses. And then entertainment expenses. Buy annual passes. Those are going to be cheaper than buying if there's any amusement parks in your area. Buy annual passes, and that'll be cheaper than going to the amusement park, every month or every 6 months or, whatever. The other thing, a lot of these amusement parks will allow you to bring your own food in rather than buying their food. So, here in Tampa Bay, we have Busch Gardens. We do have annual passes to Busch Gardens. If anyone wants to go, let me know. We'll meet you there. But the last time we went, not only do we have the annual passes, but we brought food with us. And so our entire Busch Gardens trip, other than the annual pass, the last time we went to Busch Gardens only cost us about 10 or 15 bucks to, play the games and do that kind of stuff, have our kids play the games to get the stuffed animals. That's really all we spent at Busch Gardens. So there's another way to save expenses. Charitable contributions, religious donations. I'm not necessarily going to talk about ways to cut expenses with those two things because, what you give is what you give. What you want to give is what you want to give. So there's no reason to really figure out a way to cut those types of expenses. Insurance. What type of insurance do you have? Is there a way to save on health insurance? Can you get a cheaper life insurance plan? Can you talk to your insurance agent about reducing your vehicle insurance? Will getting a new car cut your vehicle insurance because a new car is generally safer and sometimes cheaper than an older car? So, will that decision to buy a car to drop your payments also drop your insurance payments to therefore make everything more affordable? Taxes. One thing that a lot of people get really excited because they get their big tax refund every year. And one of the philosophies that I try to subscribe to, while I like to get that tax refund, I want my tax refund to be as close to zero as possible, even if it's a few dollars over. So if I have to pay the IRS $100, $200, that's fine. What I can do is decrease my holdings. If I got a big refund, decrease my withholdings at my employer, get more money in my paycheck, more money net in my paycheck. I don't get that tax refund at the end of the year, but I haven't given the government an interest-free loan either, and I get more money in my paycheck every week. That can help your budget. What other installment payments or lease payments, what can you get? I don't like to borrow a lot of money, but we just got our new kitchen. Well, not just, maybe a couple of years ago, got our new kitchen. And, we needed the kitchen. We financed it at 0% interest. It's not something that I like to do a lot. It's not something that I would tell you to do on a regular basis, but we were able to save a chunk of money and pay that money over 5 years at 0% interest. Now, there are those that'll tell you that there's costs in there and there's a cost and nothing is ever free and 0% interest doesn't exist. And while I get that, I got to save a chunk of money, and in exchange, I get to pay off this new kitchen at a very low payment at 0% interest over a long period of time. So under the right circumstances, 0% interest could be okay, but I still say you don't want to borrow if you can't afford to repay it back. So be careful there. What do you pay for alimony or child support or something like that? There's really no way to do that, to cut that. I mean, unless maybe I can bring on a divorce attorney, we can talk about ways to challenge child support payments, alimony payments. But in essence, I think those would be just things you would calculate into your budget to make sure that your budget is accurate. Not necessarily, I'm not talking necessarily about ways to reduce that type of money. What other payments do you make for people that don't live with you? So this is geared towards the parents who have kids in college. What do you send your kids in college every month, or kids that live, maybe they're out of college, but they don't live with you and you still support them? Maybe it's time to tell Junior to go out and get a job rather than paying him money every month. Maybe it's time to help your kids create that career that will help them bring in some self-employment revenue and help them bring revenue into the household. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that you're not doing that right now. I have really no idea what you're doing. I'm just trying to offer suggestions on ways that you can find more money in your budget. And so if you have kids that are of majority age, 18 or older, and they're living with you and they're not working, maybe there's a way to change that so that they do work, so that they can contribute to the household, which makes your liability, your expenses go down because they're now contributing. Or at least maybe they move out and live on their own. And again, you're not buying them food, you're not paying for their rent, you're paying their car payment, their insurance payment. You get them off the payroll, so to speak. Do you own investment property, or do you own other investments that cost money? So do you pay mortgages on other properties? Do you pay taxes, insurance, that type of thing? Do you have how many cars do you have? Did you finance a car for you, a car for your wife, or did you finance 2 cars and a motorcycle and a boat? And, what are you doing there? Is there a way to cut expenses in terms of getting rid of some of those toys? Now, again, like I said before, I'm not suggesting that you can't live a fun life. What I'm talking about And this message is geared towards people that are saying, I can't make ends meet. Well, if you can't make ends meet and you've got a boat and you're on the water every week, maybe part of the reason you can't make ends meet is because of all the boat maintenance, all the gas payments for the boat, all the supplies that you buy, all the fishing gear, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not suggesting you get rid of the boat, but if the boat is taking money from you, maybe I am for the short term until you turn finances around. And then if you want to get another boat, get another boat. But are there other ways? Are there toys that you have, boats, jet skis, electronic equipment, those types of things that you could cut your expenses by cutting some of that stuff temporarily? And then, is there anything else that I forgot? Is there anything else there that I forgot that you pay? And look at it and see, is there a way to negotiate it? Is there a way to replace it with something cheaper? Is there a way to maybe use that money to fund an asset producing item that'll produce a cash flow of revenue to pay that expense? What different item up with? So start with your gross revenue, reduce any withholdings from that gross revenue, and then take a look at what your budget is, and then take a look at what you have left over. You can go high on certain expenses like utilities for the year when electric bills may go down in the wintertime. You can do things like that to over budget certain items. And by doing that, you can create a little bit of a windfall. Like I said, when you have those 2 months where you get paid 3 times, if you can budget with just the 2 monthly payments, you've got a third payment twice a year that can go into savings. Can you increase your take-home pay by decreasing your withholdings so that you get less of a tax refund, but you get that money during the year? Can you change utilities? Can you get a new car? What other things can you try to do to reduce your expenses? Now, I said at the beginning of this episode, what I went through is the budget that I fill out for a client doing bankruptcy. I'm not suggesting that everyone here file bankruptcy. What I'm suggesting is, why pay the money for these expensive gurus that teach budgeting when the federal government has a pretty substantial budget that you can get for free? And so one of the offers I'll make to you, if you want to see this budget that I'm talking about from the bankruptcy schedules, shoot me an email, Sean at Yesner Law, SHAWN at Yesner Law, YESNER law.com. Tell me that you want a copy of the, it's called Schedule I and J budget. I think I've already done a previous podcast episode about it. Let me know you want the Schedule I and J budget in the email, and I will forward a copy to you. If you want help budgeting, please let me know. That is something else that I can help with. So in the meantime, I appreciate you. So to the Crushing Debt podcast, I apologize we ran a little bit long, but I appreciate you listening to this week's episode. I look forward to talking to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. So howdy, Facebook Live. What I'm going to do is, let me get this here set up. I've stopped recording on the podcast episode. Let me get this here set up so that we can engineer it and so we can have this episode ready to go. Now, one thing I said I would do is also talk about a system that I use for accountability. And the podcast episode ran about 21 minutes long. So I'm going to make that accountability the next podcast episode. So that gives me another piece of content here. So I'm going to stop this Facebook live stream, and I'm going to start up a new Facebook live stream, and I'll do the next podcast episode here right now in just a few minutes. So I don't see that anyone's on live now, so no questions. So I'm not going to hold out for questions. I'll just stop this live feed. I'll be back in a few minutes for another live feed and another episode of the Crushing Debt podcast.